Eleanor Whitmore pressed her hand flat against the ledger and did not cry. She had not cried in 3 years. Not when her father died with debts no one told her about. Not when the neighbors stopped calling. Not when she had to let the last housemaid go and scrub the kitchen floor herself. She did not cry. She calculated. And somewhere across the county line, a man who had never met her lifted his wine glass and said the words that would change both their lives forever. If this story already has your heart, subscribe to this channel right now and follow Eleanor's journey all the way to the end. Drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story has traveled. The summer of 1814 came to Virginia like a debt collector, slow, suffocating, and entirely without mercy. Edward Harrington sat at the long mahogany table of Ashford House, surrounded by the kind of men who believed their opinions were facts simply because no one had ever dared correct them. The candles were lit, even though the evening sun still pressed through the curtains. Mrs. Ashford liked it that way. She liked the illusion of grandeur even when the heat made the wax run sideways. Edward had been in Virginia 3 days. He'd come down from his family's primary estate in Maryland to settle a boundary dispute, a quiet matter he'd been told. Paperwork, a signature or two. Back home before the week was out. He had not expected to be seated next to Gerald Prentice, who had opinions about everything and the social immunity of old money to say all of them out loud. "The Whitmore property," Gerald said, gesturing with his fork as though conducting an orchestra no one else could hear. "Complete disaster. Father ran it into the ground, died owing half the county, and now the daughter's up there trying to manage it herself." He paused to chew, unbothered. A woman. Alone. Running an estate. In this heat. The table responded with the particular laughter of people who found other people's suffering quietly entertaining. "What's her name?" someone asked. "Eleanor. Eleanor Whitmore." Gerald shook his head. "Stubborn as a fence post and half as useful from what I hear. Refused every offer of help. Refused every introduction. Won't sell, won't yield, won't do a single sensible thing." Edward swirled his wine slowly. He wasn't particularly interested in the conversation. He was thinking about the boundary survey he needed to complete before Thursday. But then Gerald Prentice said the thing. "God help the man who ends up married to that woman. She'll manage him like a ledger entry and wonder why he drinks." The table laughed again. Edward said nothing. He didn't agree exactly. He simply didn't disagree. He filed the name Eleanor Whitmore somewhere in the back of his mind. The way a man files the name of a road he has no intention of traveling. He would forget it by morning. He did not forget it by morning. The boundary survey took him to the eastern edge of his family's Virginia holdings, 2 days later. It was early, barely past 6, and the heat was already gathering itself for another assault. His surveyor, a meticulous older man named Mr. Holt, had mapped the property line clearly. The issue was simple. A section of the drainage channel running along the southern border appeared to have shifted either from flooding the previous autumn or from deliberate rerouting. "We'll need to walk the lower field," Mr. Holt said, consulting his papers. "The line runs directly beside the Whitmore property on the south end." Edward said, "Fine," and followed him down. They heard her before they saw her. Not shouting, not crying. Something far more unsettling. She was giving instructions. Her voice carried through the morning air with the kind of quiet authority that didn't need volume, the kind that expected to be obeyed and usually was. Edward came around the stand of oak trees at the field's edge and stopped. Eleanor Whitmore was standing knee-deep in a drainage ditch. Not beside it. In it. She had her skirts knotted up past her boots, a long wooden rod in her hand, and she was directing 2 farmhands on the opposite bank with the calm precision of a woman who had done this before and fully intended to do it again. "The blockage is 2 feet further north," she said, pointing with the rod. "If you clear it at this end, you're only solving half the problem. Move north. Yes. There." One of the farmhands obeyed immediately. The other hesitated. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "Mr. Harrington's surveyors are—" "I am aware," she said, not looking up. "They can wait or they can wade. Either suits me." Edward stood at the bank. She still had not looked at him. He found inexplicably that he was not offended. "Miss Whitmore," he said. She looked up then. Her eyes were dark and entirely composed. There was mud on her jaw. She did not appear to notice or care. "Mr. Harrington," she said. Not a question. She already knew who he was. "I understand there's a dispute over the channel line." "There's no dispute," she said. "Your family's eastern drain has been rerouted. I believe it was done last October, likely without your knowledge, which is why I haven't yet taken the matter to a magistrate. I am giving you the courtesy of a direct conversation first." He stared at her. "You believe my property line was altered. I don't believe it. I measured it." She handed the rod to one of the farmhands and began making her way to the bank with the unhurried efficiency of someone who had long stopped performing dignity and simply lived it. "I have the original survey from 1809 and my own measurements taken in April. The channel has moved 11 feet north. 11 feet of my drainage capacity is now servicing your lower field." She reached the bank and climbed out without assistance, straightened her knotted skirts with one pull, looked at him directly. "I would like it corrected," she said, "this week if possible. The summer rains will compound the damage." Edward looked at Mr. Holt. Mr. Holt was already reviewing his papers with the expression of a man who suspected he was about to discover an inconvenient truth. "I'll need to verify your measurements," Edward said. "Of course you will," Eleanor said. "I've left a copy of my survey with the county records office. You're welcome to pull it." She paused. "Is there anything else?" He had 100 things he wanted to say. He said none of them. "No," he said. "Thank you, Miss Whitmore." She nodded once, not warmly, not coldly, simply, and turned back to her farmhands. Edward Harrington walked back to his horse and tried to remember the last time a conversation had left him feeling that he had been the one who needed to catch up. He couldn't think of one. He pulled the county record that afternoon. Her measurements were precise to within 2 inches. Her documentation was meticulous, dated, witnessed, cross-referenced with the original 1809 boundary filing. She had not simply noticed the problem. She had built a legal case around it before she ever said a word to him. He sat with the papers for a long time. Then he sent a note to his estate manager in Maryland. "The eastern drain on the Virginia property has been misrouted. Arrange correction immediately. Full restoration at our expense." He did not tell anyone why he was certain she was right. He simply was. Word traveled faster than Edward expected. By the following Sunday, 3 separate acquaintances had mentioned Eleanor Whitmore to him, always with that particular edge of social curiosity that meant people were watching to see what he would do. "Heard you had a run-in with the Whitmore woman?" said James Calloway, who managed the neighboring Calloway Tobacco Holdings and had the unfortunate habit of framing everything as a competition. "Stubborn piece of work, isn't she?" "She was correct," Edward said. James blinked. "I beg your pardon." "About the drainage line. She was correct. We'd misrouted it. We're fixing it." A pause. James recalibrated. "Well, all the same. Woman her age running that estate alone, it's not natural. Her father should have sold when he had the chance. Would have saved everyone the trouble." "What trouble?" Edward asked. James opened his mouth, closed it. "Well, you know." "I don't actually," Edward said pleasantly. "Explain it to me." James found somewhere else to be. Clara Wentworth arrived in Virginia on a Thursday. She came in a proper carriage with her mother and 2 trunks, and she was everything the county expected Edward Harrington's intended to be. Graceful, accomplished, perfectly suited to the role that had been arranged for her since she was 19, and he was 22, by families who understood alliances better than they understood people. Edward met her at the Ashford house with the correct degree of warmth. He said the right things. He offered his arm. He smiled when the room expected smiling. Clara was kind. She had always been kind. She asked after his journey and listened to his answers and laughed gently at the appropriate moments. And he watched her that evening across the candle-lit table and tried to locate the feeling he was supposed to have. He found courtesy, respect, familiarity. He did not find the thing that had been agitating at the back of his mind since a woman in a drainage ditch had looked at him and said, "I measured it," as though truth were simply a thing she carried in her pocket. He told himself this was normal. He told himself Clara was an excellent match, which she was. He told himself he would stop thinking about Eleanor Whitmore by the end of the week. He rode past Whitmore Estate on Saturday morning. He told himself it was because his route to the county records office passed that way. This was technically true. It was also entirely beside the point. The estate was smaller than his. The main house needed paint on the eastern shutters. The kitchen garden, however, was immaculate tight rows, well watered, yielding visibly even in the dry summer heat. The fencing along the road had been recently repaired with wood that didn't quite match the older posts, but had been set with perfect plumb. She had done that herself. He didn't know how he knew. He simply did. He did not stop. But he slowed. And then, because the universe apparently had a sense of occasion, Eleanor Whitmore walked out of the main gate, saw him, and stopped. She was carrying a basket and wearing a plain brown dress that had seen considerable use. Her hair was pinned back. She had ink on her left hand. They looked at each other across the road for a moment. "Mr. Harrington," she said. "Miss Whitmore." He tipped his hat. "The drain crew arrives Monday." "I know," she said. "Your estate manager sent word." "Good." He paused. There was no logical reason to continue the conversation. "Your fencing is well done." She looked at the fence, back at him. "Thank you." "You did it yourself." "With one farmhand and a borrowed post setter, yes." "In this heat." "The fence doesn't care about the heat," she said. "Neither do I particularly." He should have ridden on. He knew he should have ridden on. "How long have you been managing the estate alone?" he asked instead. Something shifted in her expression. Not softening exactly, more like a door opening 1 inch, just enough to see there was a room behind it. 3 years, she said. "Since my father died." "It's in better shape than people say." "People say a great many things," she replied. "Most of them haven't been on the property." "I noticed the kitchen garden. The kitchen garden keeps us fed through winter." She adjusted the basket on her arm. "Was there something you needed, Mr. Harrington, or are you conducting a general inspection of the county's properties?" He almost smiled. He caught it. "Neither," he said. "I was passing through." "Then pass," she said. Not unkindly, simply. He rode on. He thought about that conversation for the rest of the day, and could not have explained why to anyone who asked. The thing about Eleanor Whitmore, Edward was beginning to understand, was that she did not perform. Every woman he knew, every woman in his social world performed. Performed grace, performed modesty, performed the careful, calibrated dance of being exactly as capable as a man could tolerate, and no more capable than that. They laughed at the right volume. They asked questions they already knew the answers to. They made men feel necessary, even when they weren't. Eleanor didn't do any of that. She simply existed in her own world, at her own pace, by her own standards. She wasn't trying to impress him. She wasn't trying to repel him either. He was simply a factor, a neighboring landowner with a drainage problem now resolved. An occasional person on the road. He found this maddening. He found this, against all reason, completely riveting. The dinner at Ashford House on the following Wednesday should have been unremarkable. It was instead the night everything started to fracture. Gerald Prentice was there again. Gerald was always there, circulating through every social event with his opinions preloaded. And someone Edward never identified who mentioned Eleanor Whitmore's name at the table. "Heard she's taken on a second tenant for the North Field," someone said. "Growing corn now. Ambitious for a woman with no capital." "Reckless, more like," Gerald said. "She's overextending. I give it another season before she's forced to sell." "She won't sell," said Mrs. Ashford quietly. She said it the way people say things they have observed and not judged. She'll have to, Gerald said. No husband, no capital, no connections. She can't sustain it alone indefinitely. It's simply mathematics. Edward set down his fork. Clara beside him felt the movement and glanced at him. She said nothing. She was perceptive, Clara. She saw more than she said. She has sustained it for 3 years, Edward said. The table paused. With respect, Gerald said, leaning forward slightly. Sentiment isn't a business strategy. The woman is running herself into the ground. Her ledgers are balanced, Edward said. Her drainage documentation is precise enough to hold up in a county court. Her kitchen garden is producing in a drought year. Her fencing is plumb. I'd be curious what metrics you're using to declare her a failure. Silence. Gerald blinked. You've been to the property. I've ridden past it, and I've seen her survey work. He picked up his fork. She's not reckless. She's careful. There's a difference. The table recalibrated quietly. Clara's hand rested for just a moment on the table beside his. He looked at her. She looked back at him with an expression he couldn't quite read, and had he realized, never quite learned to read in all the years he'd known her. Late that night, back at the house his family kept in Virginia, Edward sat by the window with a glass of water and looked out at the dark fields. There was a light far to the south. Just one, steady and small. He had looked at a map earlier that week. He knew now the rough location of Whitmore Estate. He knew the light was almost certainly too far away to be hers. Almost certainly. He watched it for a long time anyway. He was not the kind of man who examined his own feelings closely. He was the kind of man who acted, who decided and moved and corrected and progressed. He had always found introspection vaguely indulgent. But sitting in the dark with a light on the horizon, he made himself be honest. He was thinking about Eleanor Whitmore. Not as a legal matter, not as a neighbor, not as a curiosity. He was thinking about her voice in the morning field, her hand adjusting the basket, her face when she said 3 years with no self-pity and no performance. Just fact. He was engaged to Clara Wentworth. He was going to marry Clara Wentworth. He was a man of his word, and his word had been given 2 years ago in the presence of both families, and that was simply what it was. He looked at the light on the horizon. He made himself look away. He did not sleep well that night. Monsieur. Thursday morning, he was at the county records office when Eleanor Whitmore walked in. She didn't see him immediately. She went directly to the clerk's desk and set a folder of papers on the counter with the certainty of someone who had done this before. I need to file an amendment to the Whitmore parcel map, she said. Drainage correction, eastern boundary. Here's the updated survey. The clerk took the papers and began reviewing. Edward stayed very still at the opposite counter. She saw him a moment later. There was a half-second barely visible the length of a breath where something moved across her face. Then it was gone, and she was composed again. Mr. Harrington, she said. Miss Whitmore. The correction is proceeding well, she said. Your men have been professional. I'm glad to hear it. A pause. The clerk scratched something with his pen. Outside, a horse moved on the street. I owe you an apology, Edward said. She turned fully to look at him. For what? I did not take your survey seriously at first. I had it verified before I believed it. He held her gaze. That was a discourtesy. Your documentation was sound from the beginning. I should have acted on it immediately. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. You acted on it, she said finally. That's what matters. The speed matters too. Yes, she said. It does. She did not let him off the hook, but she also did not punish him with it. Thank you for saying so. The clerk returned her papers stamped and filed. She took them, tucked them into her folder, and turned toward the door. Then she stopped. Didn't turn around. Just stopped her hand on the door frame. Mr. Harrington, she said. Whoever told you I was reckless, they were looking at the wrong numbers. He stared at the back of her head. I know, he said. She walked out. He stood at the counter for a long moment after the door closed, the clerk looking at him with the polite blankness of a man who had learned not to comment on the private dramas of Virginia landowners. Edward gathered his own papers. He walked to the door. He pushed it open into the Virginia heat and stood on the steps and looked down the street to where Eleanor Whitmore was walking away, her back straight, her folder under her arm, her boots striking the wooden walk with the rhythm of someone who had somewhere to be and intended to get there. He watched her until she turned the corner. Then he stood in the sun for a moment with the specific and inconvenient feeling of a man who has just realized that the thing he told himself he was not thinking about is the only thing he has been thinking about for 2 weeks. Clara was arriving for tea at 3 o'clock. He needed to be there. He needed to be the man he had promised to be. He turned and walked to his horse, and he told himself firmly finally that Eleanor Whitmore was a neighbor, a legal matter now resolved and nothing more. The summer disagreed with him entirely. Clara Wentworth took her tea with 2 sugars and the particular grace of a woman who had been raised to make every small thing look effortless. Edward watched her pour and thought she is genuinely good. That was the cruelest part of it. If she had been cold or selfish or difficult in any of the ways that made decisions easier, he could have located a clean reason for the feeling that had been sitting in his chest like a stone since Thursday morning. But Clara was warm and perceptive and quietly intelligent, and she had done nothing, not one single thing, to deserve the distance he was feeling from her. She set his cup in front of him and said, "You've been somewhere else for 3 days." He looked at her. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm not accusing you. I'm observing. I've had business on my mind. Edward." She said his name gently, the way you set something fragile down. "I've known you for 6 years. When you're thinking about business, you tap your left thumb against whatever surface is nearest. You haven't tapped your thumb once today." He hadn't known she'd noticed that. "What do I do when it isn't business?" he asked. "You go still," she said. "Completely still. Like you're listening for something." The room was quiet. "Clara, don't." She raised her hand, not angry, just careful. "Don't say something you're not ready to say. I'd rather the silence than a sentence you'll regret." He closed his mouth. She lifted her tea. Drank. Set it down. "Tell me about the boundary issue," she said. "The one you mentioned in your letter." And so he did. He told her about the drainage channel the county records Mr. Holt's survey. He left Eleanor out of it almost entirely. He said the neighboring property owner and moved past it quickly, and Clara listened without comment, and he knew with the absolute certainty of a man who had spent 6 years in the company of a perceptive woman that she heard exactly what he was not saying. She didn't press it. That was the thing about Clara. She had never pressed anything in her life. She moved through the world with a patience that Edward had always admired, and now sitting across from her in the afternoon heat, with guilt he couldn't name pressing against his sternum, found he could not entirely bear. "You're too good to me," he said. It came out raw. She looked at him for a long moment. "I know," she said quietly. "I've always known that might be a problem." He didn't know what to say to that. He didn't have to. She stood, smoothed her skirts, and said she needed to dress for dinner. She kissed his cheek on the way out, brief habitual warmth, and left him alone with his tea going cold, and the specific terrible clarity of a man who has just been shown a mirror he didn't ask for. Nay. He rode out early the next morning before anyone in the house was awake. Not toward Whitmore Estate. He was very deliberate about that. He rode north toward the county line through the flat summer fields where the tobacco grew thick and the road was empty enough that a man could think without interruption. He thought about the last 6 years. He and Clara had been matched by families who understood land and alliances better than they understood the people living on them. It had never been cruel, no one had forced anything, no ultimatums had been issued. It was simply the understanding Edward Harrington would marry Clara Wentworth, the estates would be united, and everyone would benefit from the arrangement. He had accepted it the way he accepted most things, rationally, practically, with a clear-eyed assessment of the advantages. He had told himself for 6 years that fondness was enough, that respect was enough, that warmth and familiarity were the foundation of a lasting life. and the rest, the things he could not name and had never looked for, were the province of novels and young people who hadn't yet learned what the world was made of. He had believed that. He wanted very badly to still believe it. He turned his horse around at the county line and rode back south, and when the road curved near the eastern border of his family's Virginia property, he did not look toward the Whitmore land. He looked forward. He rode straight. And then he heard a voice he recognized saying very clearly, "If that wheel doesn't hold, the whole load goes into the ditch, and we cannot afford to lose this harvest." He stopped. Eleanor Whitmore was standing beside a farm wagon on the side of the road. One of the rear wheels had split at the spoke, a bad break, the kind that happened in dry summer heat when wood had been worked too long without treatment. Two farm hands were crouched beside it, looking at the damage with the expression men get when they know the problem is worse than they want to admit. Eleanor was not crouching. She was standing arms crossed, looking at the wheel with the focused attention of someone running calculations. Edward dismounted before he made the decision to dismount. She heard the horse and looked up. Something crossed her face that same half-second thing, and then it was gone. "Mr. Harrington?" "Miss Whitmore." He looked at the wheel. "How bad?" "Bad enough. 3 spokes are cracked. The hub is sound, but we can't move this load without risking the whole axle." She glanced at her farmhands. "Thomas went back for the spare wheel. He'll be 40 minutes. "I have a wheel brace in my saddlebag," Edward said. "And rope." She looked at him. "I ride out early," he said. "I keep tools." "Most men of your station don't. Most men of my station didn't have a father who believed that depending on someone else to fix things was a character flaw." Something almost like amusement moved across her face. Almost. "Your father sounds like an unusual man." He was. Edward was already moving to his saddlebag. "What are you hauling?" "Corn. First cutting from the north field. I need it at the mill before noon, or I lose my place in the queue." She said it matter-of-factly, no complaint in it, just the plain arithmetic of a woman who had learned that feeling sorry for a problem didn't solve it. They worked fast. Edward braced the axle, while her farmhand Thomas, who returned in 35 minutes, not 40, fitted the spare wheel. Eleanor directed the whole operation from slightly to the left of where she was needed, which meant she was exactly where she was needed, calling adjustments with the quiet precision he was beginning to recognize as simply how she moved through the world. When the wheel was fixed and the wagon tested and solid, she turned to him. "Thank you," she said. "Straight, no performance." "It's a good north field," he said. "I noticed it from the road last week. Better yield than I'd expect in this drought." "I rotated the crops in spring," she said. "Gave the soil a season to breathe. Everyone thought it was a mistake." She paused. "It wasn't." "No," he agreed. "It wasn't." They stood beside the road with the farmhands loading back onto the wagon and the morning heat pressing down on everything, and the specific charged silence of two people who have run out of practical things to say and haven't yet decided what comes next. "You should get to the mill," he said. "Yes." She didn't move immediately. "Your men finished the drain correction yesterday afternoon." "I heard." "It's a good piece of work. Tell your estate manager." "I will." She looked at him then directly, fully the way she'd looked at him in the drainage ditch on the first morning. Like she was measuring something. Not rudely, just honestly. "You're not what I expected," she said. "What did you expect?" "The man Gerald Prentice described at dinner 3 weeks ago." He went still. "You heard that?" "Mrs. Ashford told me." A pause. "She thought I should know what was being said about me in polite company." The weight of that settled on him. She'd known about the pity comment. She'd known, and she'd come to that drainage ditch and dealt with him with complete professional courtesy and not said one word about it. "I didn't say it," he said. "To be precise, Prentice said it. You didn't contradict it." Silence. "No," he said. "I didn't. I should have." She absorbed this. "You didn't know me." "That's not sufficient reason." She looked at him for a long moment. "No," she agreed. "It isn't." She turned toward the wagon. Safe ride back, Mr. Harrington. He watched the wagon move down the road until it turned south. Then he stood on the empty road in the summer heat, with the feeling that something was happening that he did not have the right vocabulary to describe. He didn't tell Clara about the wagon. He didn't know why exactly. It was not a secret. It was not anything. A broken wheel on a country road, a neighbor in a practical difficulty, basic human assistance. There was nothing in it that required concealment. And yet he said nothing at dinner, and then said nothing the following morning, and by the third day of saying nothing, it had become by sheer accumulation of silence, a thing he was keeping. He did not like what that told him about himself. He liked even less what he did on Friday afternoon, which was ride past the Whitmore property. Again, deliberately this time, no pretense of another destination, and slow down at the gate. The estate was quiet in the afternoon heat. He could see the kitchen garden from the road. A figure moved in the far field too distant to identify, but he knew the rhythm of her movement, the way she walked, like she was going somewhere specific, and had already calculated the fastest route. He sat on his horse at the gate for longer than was reasonable. Then Mary Dorset walked out. Mary was Eleanor's closest friend. He'd learned that from Mrs. Ashford, who catalogued social connections the way other people catalogued receipts. She was a small, sharp-eyed woman of about 30, who looked at the world with the particular alertness of someone who had long ago decided that most people were less clever than they thought. She saw him immediately. "Mr. Harrington," she said with a smile that was entirely too knowing. "Are you lost?" "No," he said. "I was passing." "You passed yesterday too," she said pleasantly. "And Thursday." He had not realized she'd seen him. "I have business in this direction," he said. She tilted her head. "Eleanor is in the back field if you have business to conduct. I can fetch her." "That isn't necessary." "Then you're just riding past." "Yes. Past the same gate," she said, "on 3 consecutive days." He looked at her. She looked back at him with the serene patience of a woman who was going to win this conversation, regardless of what he said, so he might as well be honest. "How is she?" he asked. Mary's expression shifted. Something softened in it just slightly. "Tired," she said. "She doesn't say so. But I've known her since we were girls, and I know what tired looks like on Eleanor Whitmore. It looks like her back getting straighter." She paused. "She's carrying a great deal." "Alone, by choice," Mary said. "Partially, and partially because people decided she was managing without them, so they stopped offering." She looked at him carefully. "She doesn't trust easily, Mr. Harrington. She's learned not to." He nodded. "You're engaged," Mary said, not accusing, just stating. "Yes. Clara Wentworth is a fine woman." "She is." "Then you should probably stop riding past this gate," Mary said, "and go back to her." He held Mary Dorset's gaze for a moment. "You're very direct," he said. "Eleanor taught me that," Mary said. "Apparently it's contagious." The knowing smile again. "Good afternoon, Mr. Harrington." He rode home. He did not go back to the gate. He sat with Clara that evening and listened to her talk about her mother's letter and the plans for the autumn gathering. And he made himself be present, fully, deliberately present. And when she laughed at something, he said he felt the warmth of it and held on to it like a man gripping a rope over water. This was real. Clara was real. What he'd built with her over 6 years was real. Whatever was happening in his mind when he thought about Eleanor Whitmore, that was something else. Something he did not have the right to act on. Something he needed to put down and walk away from. He told himself this clearly, rationally, with the full force of his considerable self-discipline. And then, at 10:30, when the house was quiet and the candles were low, he walked to the window. There was a light to the south, same as before, steady, small burning through the dark. He stood there for a long time. The social gathering at Calloway's estate on Saturday was the kind of event that Edward had attended 100 times and never once genuinely enjoyed. Too many people saying too many things they didn't mean in rooms too warm for the season, He arrived with Clara on his arm and spent the first hour doing what was expected of him. Greeting the right people, saying the right things, standing at the correct angle to indicate commitment without being ostentatious about it. Clara moved through the room with natural ease. She belonged here in a way that had nothing to do with performance. She genuinely liked these people. She genuinely liked this world. He was watching her talk with Mrs. Ashford when Gerald Prentice materialized at his elbow. "Didn't expect to see the Whitmore woman tonight," Gerald said. Edward turned. Eleanor Whitmore was standing near the far window with Mary Dorset, wearing a deep green dress that was several seasons older than anything else in the room and fit her like she had simply never noticed fashion had moved on. She was listening to something Mary was saying with the focused attention she brought to everything, and she was not looking around the room for social approval, and she was not performing. She was simply there, in the same room as Clara. Edward felt the specific sickening recognition of a situation that had just become unavoidable. "Someone must have invited her," Gerald continued. "Calloway being generous, I suppose. Shame about the dress." "The dress is fine," Edward said flatly. Gerald blinked, moved away. Clara appeared at Edward's side. She had also seen Eleanor. He knew it from the slight shift in her posture, that half-inch adjustment of someone recalibrating. "She's striking," Clara said quietly. "Yes," he said. He did not try to pretend otherwise. He owed Clara more than a lie. Clara looked at him. "Edward?" she said very quietly, with her eyes on Eleanor across the room. "How long?" "It's nothing," he said. "It isn't. How long have you been thinking about her?" The room moved around them. Music from the next parlor. Someone laughed too loudly. "Clara, tell me the truth," she said. "Not angry, not hurt, or not yet. Just asking for the truth, the way you ask for a window to be opened in a room that's become suffocating. That's all I want. The truth." He looked at her. At the face he'd known for 6 years, the face that had never asked him for anything dishonest. 2 weeks, he said. She absorbed that. 2 weeks, she repeated softly. I haven't done anything. I haven't said. I know you haven't. She smoothed her glove. That's not what I asked. She looked across the room once more at Eleanor, then back at him. You went still, Edward. The first day you came back from the boundary survey. You went completely still, and I knew something had changed, and I told myself it was nothing because I didn't want to know. Clara, don't apologize, she said quietly. Not here. She turned to face him fully. But don't lie to me either. I deserve better than that. You deserve better than this entire situation, he said. Yes, she said simply. I do. Across the room, Eleanor was moving toward the door with Mary. She'd seen him, he knew she had. He'd felt the moment she registered his presence with Clara, and she was leaving unhurried and dignified, the way she did everything. Clara followed his gaze. When she turned back to him, something had resolved in her expression. Not coldness, something quieter and worse than coldness. We need to speak, she said, when we're away from this room. Yes, he said. Not tonight, she said. I need tonight to think. She touched his arm, once brief, deliberate, the touch of a woman who has just made a decision she hasn't announced yet. Take me home, Edward, and don't talk about it in the carriage. He didn't. The ride home was the longest 20 minutes of his year. Sunday came and went without resolution. Clara said she needed 2 days, and he gave them to her without question because it was the least he could give her, and he knew it. Monday morning, he received a note from the county records office. A small procedural matter. The boundary filing was complete, no further action required. The drainage correction was finished. By every legal and practical measure, his connection to Whitmore Estate was resolved. He read the note twice. Then he went to his desk and did something he had not planned to do. He wrote a letter. Not to Eleanor. To his father's oldest friend, Judge Nathan Alcott, a man who had known the Whitmore family, who had been practicing law in Virginia since before Edward was born, who understood the particular legal machinery of estates and inheritances and land held in trust. He wrote, "I have reason to believe the Whitmore estate may be under financial pressure that its owner has not disclosed publicly. I am not asking you to share confidential information. I am asking only whether there are any active claims against the property that I, as an adjacent landowner, should be aware of for boundary purposes." He sealed it. He held it for a moment. He told himself this was practical. Neighborly due diligence. Adjacent landowner, reasonable concern. He told himself that. Then he sent it, and sat back and was honest with himself for approximately 30 seconds about what he was actually doing, which was looking for a reason to stay involved in Eleanor Whitmore's situation. He was not proud of it. He didn't stop. Judge Alcott's response came Wednesday, and it was worse than Edward had expected. Not bad news, devastating news, the kind that required reading twice before it settled. The Whitmore estate was not merely under financial pressure. It was under active legal threat. A creditor, a man named Douglas Haverfield, who held a note against the estate that Eleanor's father had signed 3 years before his death, had filed a quiet claim against the property in the spring. Eleanor had contested it. The contest was still pending. But Haverfield had engaged a lawyer from Richmond with a reputation for grinding smaller opponents into settlement through sheer procedural volume. She was fighting it alone. She had been fighting it alone in silence for 6 months, while she managed the harvest, while she fixed the fencing, while she rerouted the drainage and grew her kitchen garden and made sure her tenants had what they needed, and told no one, because asking for help was something Eleanor Whitmore had decided at some point in the last 3 years was a luxury she could not afford. Edward set the letter down. He sat very still for a long moment. Then he stood up, put on his coat, and rode to Whitmore Estate. He did not stop at the gate this time. He knocked on the door. One of the farmhands answered young Wary, and Edward said, "Please tell Miss Whitmore that Edward Harrington is here, and it is a matter of some urgency." And the farmhand went, and Edward stood on the porch in the afternoon heat and waited. Eleanor appeared in the doorway. She was in her work dress. Ink on her hands again. She looked at him with the careful neutrality of a woman who has learned to read a person's arrival for danger before she reads it for anything else. "Mr. Harrington." "Miss Whitmore." He held up the letter. "I know about Haverfield." Something moved across her face fast there, and gone like a flinch that she caught and converted into stillness before it could fully form. "Who told you?" she said, not a question. "Judge Alcott. I asked him about boundary claims. This came up." He lowered the letter. "I'm not here to intrude. I'm here because Haverfield's lawyer is Benjamin Crail, and Crail worked against my family twice in Maryland, and I know exactly how he operates. He will file motions until you cannot afford to answer them." Her jaw tightened, barely visible. But there. "I am managing it," she said. "I know you are." He held her gaze. "I also know that managing it alone against Crail in a county where most of the bench knows Haverfield socially is not a fair fight. And I have a lawyer in Richmond who has beaten Crail 3 times. Silence. "What do you want in return?" she asked. The directness of it stopped him. Not because it was rude, because it was honest, and because it told him exactly what her experience of the world had taught her to expect. "Nothing," he said. She studied him. "No one does something like this for nothing," she said. "I'm doing it because it's right," he said. "And because Haverfield's claim is fraudulent, I've already read the note summary in Alcott's letter, and the original debt was settled by your father's estate before his death. Someone buried that record. If I'm correct, this case doesn't need defending. It needs exposing." Eleanor didn't move. She was looking at him with an expression he hadn't seen on her face before, not the composed practicality, not the careful neutrality. Something rawer than that. Something that looked, if he was reading it right, like the specific exhaustion of a person who has been holding everything alone for so long that the possibility of not holding it alone had stopped feeling real. "If you're wrong," she said, "about the settlement record, then we defend," he said. with a better lawyer than Crail on even ground. And if Haverfield retaliates files against the property directly, then we answer it directly." She was quiet for a long moment. "Come inside," she said finally. "I'll show you everything I have." He stepped through the door. The hallway was simple plain walls, a runner carpet worn thin at the center, a side table with a stack of correspondence that was clearly being organized by priority. The study beyond it was small and impossibly orderly, every paper in its place, every ledger spine labeled in her precise handwriting. She sat at the desk and pulled a folder from the second drawer. "I have every document my father ever filed," she said, "and every document I've filed since. If the settlement record exists, it will be in here." She opened the folder. They worked for 3 hours. They sat across from each other with papers spread between them, and Eleanor read aloud from documents, while Edward cross-referenced dates, and neither of them commented on the fact that this was the longest either of them had spent in the same room with another person in a long time. She made tea at some point, brought 2 cups without asking, set his down. Without comment, went back to the papers. The settlement record was in the 4th folder she opened. She found it herself halfway through a stack of her father's correspondence from the spring of 1811. A receipt witnessed and notarized, showing that Thomas Whitmore had paid the full amount of Haverfield's note 2 months before his death. She held it up. She looked at it for a moment. "He paid it," she said quietly. "He paid it and filed this, and somehow Haverfield knew it existed and filed anyway," Edward said, "banking on the chance you didn't know where it was." She looked at the document in her hand. Something moved through her face, not triumph, not relief exactly. Something older than both of those things. The specific emotion of a person who has been told they were wrong for long enough that finding proof they were right feels more like grief than victory. "My father paid his debts," she said. Her voice was even. "Everyone said he didn't. Every person in this county who looked at this estate and decided it was ruined, he paid this debt." "Yes," Edward said quietly. She set the document down carefully, pressed her hand flat against it, didn't speak for a moment. He let the silence be what it was. "I'll contact my lawyer in Richmond tomorrow morning," he said when she was ready. "With your permission." She looked up. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again. Not suspicious now, genuinely asking, trying to understand something. He thought about what to tell her. Thought about all the careful, practical, reasonable answers he could give. "Because you've been right about everything," he said, "and no one has given you the credit for it, and I am tired of watching a person do everything correctly and still be treated like a problem waiting to be solved." She looked at him for a long time. "Your fiancé," she said carefully. "That," he said, "is a separate matter. This is about justice, not about anything else." She held his gaze. "All right," she said finally. "Contact your lawyer. Send me a copy of everything he files." A pause. "And Mr. Harrington?" She looked at the document under her hand. "Thank you." He nodded. He gathered his coat and walked to the door. And he did not let himself think until he was on his horse and riding back down the empty summer road about the lamp that was burning in her study window when he looked back. Small. Steady. Same as always. He rode home in the gathering dusk and did not pretend anymore that he was not in serious trouble. The lawyer's name was Robert Finch, and he arrived from Richmond on a Tuesday with a leather satchel, a reputation that made Douglas Haverfield's attorney visibly uncomfortable at 30 paces, and the quiet confidence of a man who had spent 20 years winning cases that other lawyers had already declared lost. Edward met him at the county records office. Eleanor was already there. She had arrived first. Of course she had. She stood at the clerk's counter with her folder of documents, the same folder now augmented with the settlement receipt, and 3 additional pieces of correspondence Edward's preliminary review had identified as relevant. And she looked at Robert Finch, the way she looked at everything directly without performance measuring. Finch looked back at her with the expression of a man who had just recalibrated his expectations. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "Mr. Harrington told me you were organized. He undersold it." He tends to understate things, Eleanor said. She glanced at Edward briefly. It's a habit. Edward said nothing. He was watching the two of them and feeling something he couldn't name, something that was almost like pride and had no business being that. Finch opened his satchel. Walk me through the timeline from the beginning. Your words, not the documents. I'll read the documents after. Eleanor told it cleanly. No embellishment, no self-pity, no pauses for effect. She laid the facts out in sequence: her father's debt, the payment, the death, the 3 years of managing the estate alone, Haverfield's filing in spring, the 6 months of procedural attrition that had quietly been eating through what little capital she had managed to save. She spoke for 11 minutes without stopping, and when she finished, the room was quiet. Finch was writing. He buried the receipt, Finch said without looking up. Yes. He would have had to access the county filing system to do it, which means he had help. Finch looked up. Someone in this building helped him. The clerk at the counter had gone very still. Eleanor looked at the clerk. The clerk looked at his desk. I'd like to see the original filing log for the Whitmore estate from 1811, Finch said to him pleasantly, in the tone of a man who already knew what he was going to find. The clerk left to retrieve it. Eleanor looked at Edward. He raised his eyebrows slightly. Wait. She looked back at the door where the clerk had gone. The clerk came back with the log and handed it to Finch and did not meet anyone's eyes. Finch ran his finger down the entries. Stopped. Read. Read again. There was a supplemental filing in October of 1811, he said. 7 months after your father's death. Someone filed a document claiming the settlement receipt was invalid due to a disputed notary signature. He looked up. It was filed by a representative of Douglas Haverfield, and it was accepted by the records office without challenge. That's fraudulent, Edward said. That, Finch said, is criminal. He closed the log. Miss Whitmore, I am going to need you to trust me for approximately 6 weeks. At the end of that time, Douglas Haverfield will have no legal claim against your property, and he will have a very significant legal problem of his own. Do you understand? Eleanor stood very straight. What do I need to do? She asked. Nothing, Finch said. For the first time in 3 years, nothing. Let me do the work. She looked like she didn't know what to do with that, like she had forgotten what it felt like to be told she didn't have to carry something alone. All right, she said. Her voice was even. Her hand on the folder was not. Yeah. Edward walked her out. They stood on the steps of the records office, with the summer heat pressing down and the street moving around them, and neither of them spoke for a moment. He's good, Eleanor said finally. He's the best I've found, Edward said. She nodded, looked at the street. You didn't have to do this. We've had this conversation. I know. She turned to look at him. I want to have it once more, clearly. She held his gaze. You've now put your lawyer, your time, and your family's legal reputation into my problem. Whatever you said about justice, and I believe you meant it, there is a cost to you in this. I want to know that you understand that. I understand it. If Haverfield's people trace this back to your involvement, they already know, he said. Finch is not subtle about his connections. That's part of how he works. Haverfield knowing I'm involved is not a weakness. It's the point. She studied him. You're using yourself as a shield, she said. I'm using my position for something useful for once, he said. Something moved through her expression, something complicated. You're engaged to Clara Wentworth, she said quietly. Yes. And she knows you're here. A pause. Honest. No, he said. Eleanor looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked away down the street, and when she looked back, there was something resolved in her face, a decision made, a door carefully, deliberately closed. Go home to her, she said. Tell her. Eleanor, don't. Her voice was quiet but absolute. Don't say my name like that. Don't. She picked up her folder. You've done something good here. Don't complicate it. She stepped down off the porch, Tell your lawyer I'll have the additional documents to him by Thursday." She walked away. He stood on the steps and watched her go, and understood with the full force of a man who has been told the truth by someone who didn't have to tell it that he was out of time. Clara was sitting in the parlor when he got back. She had a letter in her hand. She set it down when he walked in, and she looked at him, and he saw in her face that the 2 days she had said she needed had been enough. "Sit down," she said. He sat. "I've been thinking," she said, "about us, about what I know and what I've been pretending not to know." She folded her hands in her lap. "Edward, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly, even if the answer is going to hurt both of us." "All right. Do you love me?" she asked. "Not fondly, not respectfully, not as a partner in an arrangement both our families approved of." She held his eyes. "Do you love me the way a man should love the woman he's going to spend his life with?" The parlor was very quiet. He thought about lying. Not because he wanted to, because he had never wanted to hurt her less than he did in that moment. He thought about saying yes and making it true through will alone, the way he had been making it true for 6 years, through sheer commitment to the plan. He didn't. "No," he said, "not the way you deserve." Clara absorbed it. She nodded once, slowly. Not crying, he had half expected crying, and then realized he should have known better. Clara Wentworth did not cry in front of people. She was too careful for that. "I know," she said quietly. "I've known for longer than 2 weeks, Edward. I've known since the spring, I think, maybe before." She straightened in her chair. "I've been telling myself it was enough, that what we had was real enough, solid enough, that the rest didn't matter." She paused. "And then you came back from Virginia, and went still, and I knew. Clara, I am so sorry." "I know you are." She looked at her hands. "Here is what I've decided. I am not going to wait for you to find a careful, honorable way to end this that protects my feelings. Because you'll take too long, and I don't have the patience for it." She looked up. "I'm releasing you from the engagement. My decision. My choice." She raised her hand when he started to speak. "Don't argue with me. I've made up my mind, and I didn't make it because of her, wherever she is and whoever she is. I made it because I deserve a man who loves me the way you don't." He didn't argue. "There will be consequences," he said, "for you, the families. I'll manage the families," she said. "I'm quite good at managing things when I decide to." A very slight, very sad smile. "That's something we have in common, actually." He looked at her. "You're a remarkable woman," he said. "I know," she said. "Tell your family I changed my mind. It will be better for both of us if it comes from my side." She picked up the letter from the table. "My mother will be furious. She'll recover." She set the letter down again. "Go, Edward, before I change my mind about being dignified about this." He stood. He felt the specific, devastating weight of ending something that had been good, even when it hadn't been right. "Clara," he said at the door. "Don't," she said gently. "Just go." He went. The news moved through Virginia society in 3 days. It moved the way all social news moved, faster than facts, slower than speculation, arriving at each household, slightly warped from the version that had left the previous one. By Thursday, it was generally understood that the engagement between Edward Harrington and Clara Wentworth had ended. By Friday, the theories had multiplied. By Saturday, Gerald Prentice had a version involving a secret letter, an unpaid debt, and a scandal in Maryland that bore absolutely no resemblance to what had actually happened. Edward ignored most of it. What he could not ignore was his mother's letter, which arrived Friday morning from Maryland, and covered 4 pages with the particular energy of a woman who had been blindsided by information she considered herself entitled to have first. He read it twice. Then he wrote back. "The engagement ended by mutual agreement. Clara is well. I will explain the rest in person when I am home in September. Please tell Father I am managing the Virginia business efficiently and expect to have it wrapped by end of summer." He sent it. He did not explain the rest in the letter because the rest was not something he knew how to put in a letter yet. Mary Dorset found him on Monday. She was not subtle about it. She appeared at the Callaway Social, the weekly gathering that the county's landowners used as an excuse to discuss business while pretending to discuss weather, and she came directly to him with a cup of tea. She had no intention of drinking and said without preamble, "Eleanor knows." He went still. "About the engagement." "Oh, everyone knows about the engagement," Mary said. "What Eleanor knows is that you went to the county records office with your lawyer the day before you ended things with Clara." She paused. "She thinks you ended the engagement because of her." "That's not—" "I know it isn't the only reason," Mary said. "Whether it's part of the reason is a question I'm not going to ask you because it isn't my business. What is my business is that Eleanor has been in a state for 4 days that I can only describe as controlled fury, and I have known that woman since we were 7 years old, and I need you to understand what that means." He waited. "Eleanor doesn't get angry," Mary said. "She gets cold, and she gets quiet, and she gets back to work. If she's furious, it's because she's scared. She's scared that she caused this, that she did something or said something or simply existed in a way that led to you ending an engagement, and she will not be able to forgive herself for that." Mary looked at him directly. "She's over there right now rewriting every conversation you've had and trying to identify what she did wrong. She didn't do anything wrong." "I know that. You need to tell her." "She told me not to." "I know what she told you," Mary said. "She tells everyone to leave her alone when she's scared. It's what she does. You go anyway." He looked at Mary Dorset, this small, sharp-eyed woman who loved Eleanor with the uncomplicated fierceness of someone who had simply decided to and never looked back. "You're remarkable," he said. "I'm practical," she said. "Now go." He rode to Whitmore Estate that afternoon. The farmhand at the gate, the same wary young man from before, saw him coming and this time said nothing. Just opened the gate. Eleanor was in the study. She heard him in the hallway and was on her feet before he reached the door, and when he walked in, she was standing behind the desk, with the expression of a woman who had decided in the last 4 steps exactly what she was going to say and exactly how she was going to say it. "Mr. Harrington, I didn't end the engagement because of you," he said. She stopped. "I ended it because it was wrong," he said. "It had been wrong for a long time, and I was too committed to the plan to see it. And then I met you, and the contrast made me see what I'd been refusing to look at. But Clara made the decision. She released me. She said specifically clearly that it was her choice, and that she deserved a man who loved her the way I didn't." He held Eleanor's gaze. "You did not cause that. You made me honest. There is a difference." Eleanor was very still. "It doesn't matter," she said. Her voice was controlled. "Whether I caused it directly or—" "It matters to me," he said, "because you're punishing yourself for it. Mary told me." "Mary should—" "Mary loves you," he said, "and she's right." Eleanor looked at him across the desk. Her jaw was tight. Her hands were flat on the ledger in front of her. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "I need you to say it plainly. No careful language, no practical framing. What do you actually want?" He looked at her. "I want to know if I have any place in your life," he said. "Not because I'm useful. Not because I have a lawyer and a position and a family name that can pressure Haverfield. I want to know if I as a person, as a man, as someone who has been thinking about you since the first morning in that drainage ditch, have any place anywhere near you." The room was quiet. Eleanor looked at the ledger under her hands, at the settlement receipt still sitting in the corner of the desk where she'd left it after Finch's visit, at the window where the afternoon light was coming through the thin curtains. "I don't know you well enough to answer that," she said finally. "That's an honest answer." "I'm always honest," she said. "Sometimes it's the only thing I have." She looked up. "I don't let people in easily. I stopped doing that a long time ago. And you are—" She paused, choosing the word carefully. "You are not a simple situation, Mr. Harrington." "No," he agreed. "I'm not. You've just ended an engagement. The county is talking. Your family is going to have opinions. and you're standing in my study telling me you want a place in my life which is—" She stopped, started again. "Which is not a small thing to say." "I know it isn't. And I have a lawsuit," she said, "and a harvest, and tenants, and 11 things on my desk that need to be done before nightfall." Her voice was not cold. It was simply real. The most honest account of her life, stated plainly without apology. "I know," he said. "Then you understand why I can't just—" She pressed her hand flat against the ledger. "I can't think clearly about this right now. There is too much happening, and I do not make decisions when I cannot think clearly. I have learned that the hard way." "All right," he said. "That's not a no," she said quietly. "I want you to understand that. It's not a no. It's a—" She exhaled. "It's a not yet." Something in his chest loosened in a way that surprised him. "I can work with not yet," he said. "Don't read too much into it." "I won't." She looked at him for a moment. Then, "The documents for Finch are on the corner of the desk. Take them when you go." He picked up the folder. At the door, he stopped. "Eleanor," he said. She looked up. "Your father paid his debts," he said. "The whole county is going to know it before Finch is done." Something crossed her face fast, unguarded the thing she usually caught before anyone could see it. "Good," she said. Her voice was barely steady. He walked out. What Edward did not know riding home that evening was that Douglas Haverfield had not been idle. While Finch had been assembling the legal case, Haverfield had been assembling something else, a social one. He was a man who understood with the precision of someone who had spent 30 years navigating Virginia's landholding class that a legal defeat could be managed if the social ground was prepared correctly. You did not need to win the lawsuit. You needed the right people to believe the right things before the verdict came down. He had spent the week talking, not loudly, quietly, the way a man plants seeds in dry ground and waits for heat to do the rest. He had mentioned in 3 separate conversations with 3 separate people, who each thought they were the only one hearing it, that Eleanor Whitmore's debt situation was more complicated than the public record suggested. That Thomas Whitmore's accounting had been the word he used was irregular. Not fraudulent, just irregular. The kind of word that means nothing and implies everything. He had also mentioned, because he was thorough, that the new attention being paid to the Whitmore estate by Edward Harrington was the kind of thing that raised questions. A man of Harrington's standing, recently unengaged, involving himself in a female neighbor's legal affairs. One had to wonder what the arrangement was. By Tuesday of the following week, Eleanor had heard 3 versions of this from 3 different directions. She heard the first from her tenant farmer, who told her, carefully watching her face for her reaction, that there was talk in town about the nature of her relationship with Harrington. She heard the second from Mrs. Ashford, who came to call with the specific energy of a woman delivering bad news she has dressed up as friendly concern. She heard the third from Mary, who delivered it directly and without softening. "Haverfield is trying to make you look like you've traded your reputation for legal help. He's hoping it turns the county against you before the case resolves." Eleanor sat with it for a long time that evening. She was used to people talking. She had been the subject of county commentary since her father died, the woman who wouldn't sell, who wouldn't yield, who insisted on managing alone, who was either admirable or a cautionary tale, depending on who you asked. She had built calluses around that particular kind of pain. This was different. This attached her name to Edward's in a way that was designed to hurt them both. If the county believed she had compromised herself to secure legal assistance, Finch's work became tainted. If they believed Edward was acting out of improper interest rather than legitimate legal concern, his involvement could be challenged. Haverfield was not attacking the lawsuit. He was attacking the credibility of everyone involved in it. Eleanor sat at her desk and thought about it for 3 hours. Then she made a decision. She sent for Edward. Not a long note. 5 words. "Come tomorrow morning. Early. Please." He was at her gate by 6:30. She met him outside, which was deliberate, a conversation in the open, visible to anyone on the road, leaving no room for the kind of speculation that happened behind closed doors. "Haverfield is talking," she said without preamble. "About us. About the nature of why you're involved." "I know," he said. "My estate manager told me yesterday." "Then you understand the problem?" "Yes." "If the county believes I've traded my reputation for your help, Finch's case becomes complicated," he said. "Yes, Haverfield is trying to poison the well before Finch can present the evidence." She looked at him. "There's a solution." "I know what the solution is," he said carefully. "You want me to step back. Remove my name from the legal involvement. Let Finch proceed independently." "Yes," she said. "If you're not visibly involved, Haverfield's narrative falls apart. And if I step back, you're fighting this with my lawyer, but without my support." "I've been fighting things alone for 3 years," she said. "I know how to do it." He looked at her. "I don't want to step back," he said. "I know you don't." "Eleanor." He said her name quietly. "If I step back now, it looks like I'm abandoning you because the social cost got too high. That does its own damage. Less damage than what Haverfield is building. You don't know that." She looked at the road. A farmhand was moving across the far field, too distant to hear them. The morning was very quiet otherwise. "What's the alternative?" she asked. And here was where everything shifted. Because the alternative, the one that would neutralize Haverfield's narrative completely, the one that would make every piece of social speculation collapse under its own weight, was sitting right in front of both of them. Neither of them had said it. It was too large, too fast, too loaded with everything they had both been carefully not saying for 3 weeks. Edward looked at her. She looked at him. "Don't," she said. Her voice was barely above quiet. "Whatever you're about to say, don't say it like it's a strategy." "It isn't a strategy," he said. "Then what is it?" He was quiet for a moment. "It's the truth," he said, "told in the wrong order, in the wrong circumstances, at the worst possible time. And I know that. And I'm not going to say it because it would be unfair to you to say it right now in this situation when you can't tell the difference between what I mean and what's convenient." She held his gaze. "That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me," she said quietly. "I'm working on it," he said. She looked away, at her estate, at the field where the corn was coming in, at the gate he was standing outside of. "Step back from the visible involvement," she said finally. "Keep Finch. Have him proceed in your name quietly. But don't come here. Not for a few weeks." She paused. "Let the talk die." "And after?" She was quiet for a long moment. "After," she said, "we'll see where we are." It was not what he wanted to hear. It was also he recognized the most she was able to give, and more than he deserved given the timing and evidence of exactly the kind of careful, clear-eyed honesty that had made him unable to stop thinking about her since a morning in a drainage ditch 5 weeks ago. "All right," he said. He rode out. She stood at the gate and watched him go. She did not go back inside until the road was empty. And then she sat down in her study, with the lamp burning, and the ledgers, and the lawsuit, and the harvest, and all the weight of everything she was carrying. And she allowed herself for exactly 2 minutes, no more, to feel the full, inconvenient, terrifying truth of the thing she had been refusing to feel. Then she picked up her pen and got back to work. 3 weeks of silence felt different than Eleanor had expected. She had told him not to come. She had said it clearly, deliberately, with the full knowledge of why it was necessary, and she had meant every word of it. She was not a woman who said things she didn't mean. She had learned too early that imprecise language cost you things you couldn't get back. But she had not accounted for how loud silence could be when you'd grown accustomed to the particular quality of one person's presence. She worked. That was what she did, what she had always done when everything else became uncertain. The lawsuit moved forward under Finch's hands, quiet and deliberate, and invisible from the outside, which was exactly what they'd agreed. The harvest came in on the north field better than she'd projected, the corn yield solid enough that she allowed herself one evening of genuine relief before moving immediately to the winter planning. She met with her tenants. She filed her monthly accounts. She repaired the south fence line herself on a Thursday morning when the heat had broken slightly, working alongside her farmhand Thomas, with the focused satisfaction of physical labor that produced visible results. She did not look at the road. She told herself she was not looking at the road. Mary came on Fridays as she always had, and they sat together with tea going warm in the cups, while they talked about practical things. Mary's family, the county news, the progress of the lawsuit. Mary did not mention Edward. This was, Eleanor understood, a deliberate and disciplined act of love, because Mary's natural mode was to mention everything, and Eleanor had not asked her to stop. She had simply stopped, because she knew. The Haverfield talk is dying down, Mary said on the third Friday. People are moving on to something else. Apparently, Gerald Prentice's son eloped with a girl from Fredericksburg, which is doing everyone the favor of being far more interesting. Good, Eleanor said. Finch sent a letter to Haverfield's attorney last week, Mary continued. I heard it from Judge Alcott's clerk. Apparently, it was quite something. 6 pages. The clerk said Haverfield's man read it, and then sat down and didn't say anything for a full minute. Eleanor looked into her tea. Good, she said again. Mary was quiet for a moment. You can say his name, Mary said gently. I won't expire. Eleanor looked up. I know I can, she said. You haven't. Not in 3 weeks. I'm aware. Eleanor. Mary set down her cup. I'm not going to push you. I promised myself I wouldn't push you, but I've been watching you get quieter every week, and the back of your dress is getting straighter every time I see you, and I need to say one thing, and then I'll stop. Eleanor waited. You are allowed to want things, Mary said. That's all. You are allowed to want things that aren't entirely practical and that you can't manage alone, and that might cost you something to have. You are allowed. The room was quiet. I know, Eleanor said finally. Her voice was not entirely steady. Do you? Mary asked. Eleanor did not answer. Mary picked up her cup and let the silence be what it was. She was good at that, at sitting with Eleanor in the difficult parts without trying to resolve them. It was one of the things Eleanor loved most about her, even when it was the most uncomfortable. After Mary left, Eleanor sat at her desk until the lamp needed filling, and she did not work, and she did not read, and she looked at the window and the dark beyond it and let herself think about the thing she had been refusing to think about for 21 days. She was not afraid of him. That was the thing she'd had to untangle sitting alone with it. She had told herself for weeks that her caution was wisdom, that she was being careful, rational, measured, all the things she prided herself on being. But sitting in the quiet with no performance required she had to be honest. It was not caution. It was fear. Not fear of him. Fear of what it meant to let someone in after 3 years of proving she didn't need anyone. Fear that she had gotten very good at being alone and might not know how to be anything else. Fear that she would let him matter. And then something would happen, he would leave or decide the social cost was too high, or simply look at her life and realize it was a great deal of work, with very little of the softness men expected, and she would have to rebuild the walls. She was only now admitting she had taken down brick by brick without noticing. Since the morning he'd knocked on her door with a judge's letter and a lawyer's name. She picked up her pen. She put it down. She went to bed, and she did not sleep well, and in the morning she got up and made tea and stood at the kitchen window and looked south at the empty road. The letter came on a Monday. Not from Edward, from Finch. She read it standing at the kitchen table, still in her work dress, and by the second paragraph, her hand was gripping the paper tight enough to wrinkle it. Haverfield had made a countermove. He had not filed a legal response to Finch's 6-page letter. He had done something smarter and uglier. He had gone to the county land board and filed a petition claiming that the Whitmore estate's drainage modifications, the very corrections that Edward's crew had completed in July, had been performed without proper authorization and had altered the natural water flow in a manner detrimental to neighboring properties, namely his own. He was claiming that fixing the drainage had damaged him. He was using the correction as a weapon. Eleanor set the letter down. She stood in the kitchen for a moment with her hands flat on the table, and the particular cold clarity that came over her when something outrageous happened, and she needed to decide how to feel about it after she had decided what to do about it. Then she picked up the letter, went to her desk, and wrote to Finch, "I need a meeting. This week. Bring the original 1809 survey and the county land board filing requirements from that year. I have an idea." She sent it with Thomas. Then she wrote a second note. She sat with the paper in front of her for a long moment. She wrote, "He's moved. I need you to know. Not because I'm asking for help. Finch is handling it, but because you were part of the correction, he's now calling a violation, and you should hear it from me first." She signed it E. Whitmore. She stared at it. She added below her name in smaller handwriting, "The lamp is still on." She did not know why she added that. She almost crossed it out. She sent it anyway. Edward read the note at his desk on Monday afternoon and was on his horse by Monday evening. He stopped himself at the county line. She had said not to come. She had said a few weeks, and it had been 3. And she had been specific about what she needed. And one of the things he had learned in the past month was that Eleanor Whitmore's words were not decorative. They meant exactly what they said. And riding to her gate the moment she made contact was the action of a man who was not listening. He turned back. He sent a response instead. "Finch will be ready. Tell me what you need." He sat with her note for a long time. "The lamp is still on." He did not know precisely what that meant in her internal language, and he did not want to assume, and he was terrified to hope, and he felt sitting in the quiet of his Virginia study, with the summer finally beginning to give way to the first hint of September cool, like a man standing outside a door he has been told to wait, at not rejected, not welcomed, just waiting. He could do that. He was learning to do that. Finch's meeting with Eleanor happened on Wednesday. Edward was not there. He knew about it because Finch sent him a 1-paragraph summary afterward. Miss Whitmore identified a provision in the 1809 county land regulations that Haverfield's petition fails to account for, specifically a clause requiring that any drainage complaint be filed within 18 months of the alleged modification. The correction was completed in July. His petition was filed in September. He is outside the window by approximately 60 days. I will have the dismissal motion filed by Friday. Edward read it twice. He sent back, "She found it herself. Finch." She walked in with the citation already marked. "I merely confirmed it." Edward sat with that. She had found the legal provision that killed Haverfield's countermove. She had been living with county land regulations long enough to know them well enough to cite them on 2 days' notice. She had turned a crisis into a conclusion before most people would have finished panicking. He wrote to her, not about the case, about something else. He wrote, "I'm not going to say what I said I wouldn't say. But I want you to know that I've been thinking about what you told me, that you don't know me well enough. I would like to correct that when you're ready. On your terms. At your pace. There is no urgency from my direction. I'm not going anywhere." He sent it. He waited. Her response came the next morning. 4 words Sunday, after the service. He was at the county church on Sunday, with the composed expression of a man who was not watching the door. He was absolutely watching the door. She came in with Mary 3 minutes before the service started, and she sat 2 rows ahead and to the left, and she did not look back. He looked at the back of her head for an hour and thought about drainage ditches and broken wagon wheels and settlement receipts and a lamp burning in a study window in the dark. After the service in the churchyard, while everyone gathered in the particular social shuffle of Virginia Sunday mornings, she found him at the edge of the yard near the old oak. "Walk with me," she said. They walked, not toward her property or his, just along the road that ran past the church in the Sunday morning quiet, with enough space between them that no one watching could have called it anything except 2 neighbors speaking. "Finch says the petition will be dismissed," she said. "Yes. And the main case. Finch expects a ruling within 2 weeks. The evidence is complete. He filed the settlement receipt with the court last Thursday." He paused. "It's in the public record now. Anyone who wants to see that your father paid his debt can walk into that office and read it." She was quiet for a moment. He heard her breathe. 2 more weeks, she said. At most. She nodded. They walked a few more steps. I want to ask you something, she said. And I need you to answer me honestly, even if it's uncomfortable. All right? When this is over, when the case is done and Haverfield is gone and there's nothing left to fix or fight or manage together, what do you want? She looked at him. Not in practical terms, not in terms of what makes sense or what looks right to the county. What do you actually want? He stopped walking. She stopped too and turned to face him. I want to know you, he said. Past the lawsuit, past the drought and the harvest and the county records office. I want to know what you read and what you think about and what you do when there's nothing that needs fixing. He held her gaze. I want to know if there's a version of your life where I'm in it, not to change it, not to fix it, just to be in it. She looked at him for a long moment. The churchyard was visible in the distance. People were beginning to disperse. I read history, she said quietly. When I have time, which isn't often, I think about the estate constantly, even when I'm trying not to. It's there like a second pulse. She paused. And when there's nothing that needs fixing, which hasn't happened in 3 years, I used to walk the south field in the evening just to watch the light change. He was listening like she was telling him something important. She was. That's the version of my life I'm trying to get back to, she said. A life where there are evenings, where not everything is crisis and calculation. She looked at the road ahead. I don't know if there's room in that life for someone else. I've been alone for so long, I'm not certain I remember how to divide the space. That's honest, he said. I'm always honest, she said. You know that by now. Yes, he said. It's one of the things that makes you... He stopped. She looked at him. Say it, she said quietly. It's one of the things that makes you extraordinary, he said. And I'm aware that's a great deal to put on someone who just wants evenings back. Something happened in her face. Something that wasn't quite a smile, but lived in the same neighborhood. Walk me home, she said. They walked, not talking, just walking in the Sunday morning quiet side by side on the road between the church and her gate, close enough that their footsteps fell into the same rhythm without either of them deciding to. At the gate, she stopped. She turned to look at him. Come for tea on Thursday, she said. Not about the case, just tea. Yes, he said. I make terrible tea, she said. I'm warning you. I don't particularly like tea, he said. She looked at him. That's the most useful thing you've told me, she said. He almost laughed. He caught it. She caught him catching it, and something in her face softened in the particular way of a person who is very slowly and very carefully deciding to let a wall down. Thursday, she said. She went inside. He stood at the gate for a moment in the September morning. He was smiling. He made himself stop before he rode back past the churchyard. He was not entirely successful. Haverfield made one more move. It came on Tuesday, 2 days before Thursday, with the timing of a man who had run out of legal options and decided to try something worse. He came in person. To Whitmore Estate. Eleanor was in the study when Thomas knocked and said with the specific, careful expression of a man delivering news he knew was trouble. Mr. Haverfield is at the gate, ma'am. Says he wants to speak with you directly. Eleanor set down her pen. Tell him he can speak with my attorney, she said. Thomas left. Came back 90 seconds later. He says it's not about the case, says it's personal. She looked at Thomas for a moment. Let him in, she said. Leave the front door open and stay in the hallway. Haverfield was a large man who had learned to use his size as a form of argument. He came into her study with the particular manner of someone who believed they were granting a favor by arriving, and he sat without being invited to, and he looked at her across the desk with an expression that was trying to be conciliatory and landing somewhere closer to condescending. Miss Whitmore, he said. I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot. She looked at him. I don't think that, she said. He recalibrated slightly. I'm here because I think there's a way to resolve this that benefits everyone. A settlement. You withdraw your contest. I withdraw my petition, and we agree on a payment arrangement for the original debt that gives you time to—" "The debt was paid," she said, "in full, in 1811, by my father. The receipt is in the county court record. Your attorney has seen it. You have seen it." She held his gaze. "There is no debt. The notary signature on that receipt is valid," she said. "Verified by Judge Alcott and 2 independent legal consultants. My attorney has the certifications." She folded her hands on the desk. "Mr. Haverfield, I want to be very clear with you. I understand what you're doing. You filed a fraudulent claim because you believed I didn't have the resources to fight it. You were wrong about that. You attempted to damage my reputation through social channels because you believed I didn't have the social standing to survive it. You were wrong about that too. And you filed a petition against a legal drainage correction because you believed I didn't know the land regulations well enough to challenge it. I expect by now you understand you were wrong about that as well." Haverfield's expression had shifted. The conciliatory effort was gone. "You're making an enemy," he said. "I didn't make this enemy," she said evenly. "You made yourself one. Harrington won't protect you forever," he said. "He's a Maryland man with Virginia problems. He'll go home eventually." She looked at him steadily. "I have never needed anyone to protect me," she said. "What I needed was a fair legal fight, and I have that. Whether Mr. Harrington is involved or not is not your concern and not relevant to the outcome." She stood. "I think you should go." He didn't move immediately. He looked at her with the expression of a man recalculating the cost of a decision he'd already made and finding it higher than he'd expected. "Your father," he started. "My father paid his debts," she said. Her voice was quiet and absolute. "Every one of them. Get out of my house." He got up. He walked out. She heard the front door, heard Thomas closing it, heard hoofbeats on the road. She sat back down. Her hands were shaking. Not from fear. From the specific physical release of adrenaline after a confrontation that required absolute steadiness. The kind of shaking that happened not when you were breaking, but when you had held, and the holding was finished, and your body was catching up to the fact that it was over. Thomas appeared in the doorway. "Ma'am, you all right?" "Yes," she said. "Thank you for staying." "Course," he said. He hesitated. "You want me to send word to Mr. Harrington?" She looked at her shaking hands. "No," she said. "I'll tell him Thursday." Thomas nodded and left. She sat alone in the study and let her hands shake until they stopped, which took 3 minutes. Then she picked up her pen and finished what she'd been working on before the interruption. She told Edward on Thursday. She told it the same way she told everything directly in sequence without embellishment, and she watched his face move through something she recognized as controlled anger on her behalf, which was a feeling she had never experienced from someone else and did not entirely know how to receive. "He came here," Edward said. His voice was level, the kind of level that requires effort. "Yes." "To your house?" "Yes. I asked Thomas to stay in the hall." She looked at him across the kitchen table. The tea between them was, as promised, not particularly good. Neither of them was drinking it. "I handled it." "I know you did." He looked at her. "Are you all right?" "My hands shook afterward," she said, "for 3 minutes." "That's not weakness," he said immediately. "I know," she said. "I'm not ashamed of it. I'm telling you because—" She paused, looked at the cup in front of her. "I'm telling you because you asked if I was all right, and the honest answer includes the 3 minutes." He was quiet for a moment. "Thank you for telling me," he said. The kitchen was very quiet. September light came through the window softer than August, the season finally beginning to turn. "He said you'd go home eventually," she said. "Back to Maryland. He was trying to frighten you." "I know. It didn't work." She looked at him steadily. "But I want to ask you directly, since we're apparently doing that now. Are you staying in Virginia? Or is this temporary?" He looked at her. My family has held the Virginia property for 30 years, he said. I've been thinking for some time about whether I want to manage it myself, rather than leaving it to an estate manager. He paused. I'm thinking about it more seriously now, because of the lawsuit. Because of several things, he said. The lawsuit is one. The fact that I've spent more time here this summer than anywhere else and found that I didn't want to leave is another. She held his gaze. I'm not asking you to stay for me, she said carefully. I know you aren't, he said. That's not why I'd stay. Why then? He thought about it. Because I'm tired of managing things at a distance, he said. Because I want a life that is actually here rather than a life I'm administering from somewhere else. He looked at her. And yes, because the thought of leaving Virginia and not seeing you argue with a county clerk again is genuinely unbearable. She looked at him for a moment. Then she picked up her terrible tea and drank some. The Haverfield ruling comes next week, she said. Yes. And after, he looked at her across the table. After, he said, I was hoping you'd let me help with the south fence. I noticed 3 posts need replacing. She stared at him. You noticed my fence posts. 3rd, 4th, and 7th from the gate. The wood's been in the ground too long. She was quiet. I have spare posts in the barn, she said finally. I know, he said. I counted them when I was here in July. Something moved through her face. That thing that lived near a smile, but wasn't quite one. The thing he had been watching for since the first morning in the drainage ditch. Thursday week, she said. If the ruling comes down the way we expect. And if it doesn't, then we deal with what it is, she said. And you bring your lawyer. And the fence. The fence still needs doing either way, she said. He nodded. The afternoon light held them both in the small kitchen with the terrible tea, and neither of them moved, and neither of them needed to. And the season kept turning quietly around them like it intended to keep doing so for a long time. The ruling came on a Wednesday. Finch sent word by early morning rider, and Eleanor was already at her desk when Thomas knocked and handed her the sealed letter with the expression of a man who had been praying for good news and was not entirely sure he'd gotten it. She broke the seal. She read it once. Then again. Then she set it flat on the desk and pressed both hands against it and closed her eyes for exactly 10 seconds. The court had ruled in her favor. Complete dismissal of Haverfield's claim. The original debt declared settled in full, the 1811 counterfiling declared fraudulent, the petition against the drainage correction thrown out on the procedural grounds she had identified herself. Haverfield had been ordered to pay court costs. Finch had appended a note in his precise handwriting. The clerk who accepted the fraudulent 1811 filing has been referred to the county magistrate for review. I expect further proceedings against Haverfield personally within the month. The Whitmore estate is clear. She opened her eyes. Thomas was still in the doorway. Good news? He asked carefully. Yes, she said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. Tell the others. And Thomas? He stopped. Thank you. For everything this summer. All of it. He nodded once with the dignity of a man who did not need more than that, and left. Eleanor sat alone in the study with the ruling in front of her and her father's name on the settlement receipt. The receipt that was now in the permanent public record. The one that said in the language of law and notary stamps and witnessed signatures that Thomas Whitmore had paid what he owed, and his daughter had been right to fight for it. She did not cry. She had said she didn't cry. She sat there for 7 minutes anyway, not doing anything, just sitting with the weight of 3 years lifting off her spine one vertebra at a time. Then she picked up her pen and wrote 2 letters. The first was to Finch. Thank you. Send your final invoice to me directly. I will settle it within the month. The second was shorter. She wrote, It's done. Wednesday. Come Thursday as we planned and bring work gloves. The fence won't fix itself. She signed it E. Just E, no Whitmore. She noticed that after she'd sealed it. She didn't write a second one. Edward read the note at breakfast and put it in his coat pocket, and kept his hand over it for a moment, like a man checking that something was still real. He sent back Thursday. I'll be there by 7. Then he sat at his desk and wrote the letter he had been composing in his head for 2 weeks. Not to Eleanor, to his mother. He wrote clearly, and without apology, he was staying in Virginia. He would take over direct management of the family's Virginia holdings effective October 1st. He intended to make it his primary residence. He understood this was unexpected. He understood there would be questions. He would answer them when his mother visited in the autumn, which he was inviting her to do if she was willing to see the property as it was rather than as she imagined it. He wrote, "There is also a woman I would like you to meet. She is not who you would have chosen for me. She is considerably better." He sealed it before he could revise it. He sent it before he could reconsider. Mary Dorset arrived at Whitmore Estate on Wednesday afternoon approximately 4 hours after the ruling, which meant someone had told her, which meant the county was already talking, which meant Eleanor's name was moving through Virginia in an entirely new direction for the first time in 3 years. Mary came through the front door without knocking, her long-established right, and found Eleanor in the kitchen making bread, which she only did when something significant had happened, and she needed her hands busy. "It's over," Mary said. "Yes. You won." "The law agreed with the facts," Eleanor said, turning the dough. "That's what was supposed to happen." "Eleanor." Mary sat at the table. "Stop the bread for a moment and look at me." Eleanor looked up. "You fought for 3 years," Mary said. "You fought alone in the middle of a drought with no capital and no family and half the county waiting for you to fail. You kept every tenant fed. You kept the estate running. You found the settlement receipt that everyone missed. You found the legal provision that killed Haverfield's counter-petition." She paused. "And now it's over, and you're making bread." Eleanor held her gaze. "What else would I do?" she asked. "Celebrate," Mary said. "Allow yourself one morning of not being strategic about everything." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "I celebrated for 7 minutes this morning," she said, "after I read the ruling." Mary stared at her. 7 minutes, Mary repeated. "I sat still and didn't work for 7 minutes. That's the most Eleanor Whitmore thing you have ever said to me in 30 years. Eleanor almost smiled. "The bread needs to finish." "The bread can wait." Mary leaned forward. "Tell me about Thursday." And there it was, the thing Eleanor had been navigating around all day, the thing that was sitting beside the ruling in her chest, different in texture, but equally large. "He's coming to help with the fence," she said. "The fence," Mary said. "The south line. 3 posts need replacing." "You're going to spend the day replacing fence posts with a man who has been in love with you since July." Eleanor turned the dough. "He hasn't said that," she said. "Eleanor." "He hasn't said it." "He ended an engagement," Mary said. "He brought a Richmond lawyer to a county records dispute. He rode past your gate for 3 consecutive days. He argued with Gerald Prentice at a dinner table on your behalf before he even knew you." She paused. "He doesn't need to say it." Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. "I know," she said finally. "I know he hasn't said it because he's waiting for me to be ready to hear it." She set her hand still on the dough. "And I keep trying to determine if I am." "Are you?" The kitchen was very quiet. "I think," Eleanor said carefully, "that I stopped being afraid of it sometime around the Tuesday he didn't come, even though I wrote him a note about Haverfield. He could have come. He had a reason. He stayed away because I'd asked him to." She paused. "A man who actually listens, is rarer than I had remembered." Mary looked at her with the expression of someone who has been waiting a long time to hear exactly this. "Say that again," Mary said, "but to him." "I intend to," Eleanor said. "On Thursday. After the fence. Some of it might be before the fence, depending on how the morning goes." Mary laughed, the kind of laugh that came from somewhere deep and genuine. And Eleanor, standing at her kitchen table with dough on her hands and the ruling on her desk, and September light coming through the window, allowed herself to laugh too. Not long, not loud, just real. The specific, unguarded sound of a woman who has been holding everything together for 3 years and has finally reached the other side. Thursday morning came in cool and clear, the first genuinely autumn-like morning of the season, and Edward arrived at the Whitmore gate at 6:58 with work gloves in his coat pocket and a set of post-setting tools tied to his saddle. Eleanor was already outside. She was standing at the south fence line counting posts, and she turned when she heard the horse, and when she saw him, she did something he had not seen her do before. She smiled. Not the almost smile, not the thing that lived near warmth and stayed carefully controlled. A real one, small and quick, and gone in a moment, but real. "You counted the posts," she said. "Third, fourth, and seventh," he said, dismounting. "Still the same ones." "And the eighth?" she said. "I found it yesterday. The woods rotted at the base." "4 then," he said. "4," she agreed. They worked. That was the thing neither of them had said, and both of them understood working alongside Eleanor Whitmore was its own conversation. She knew what she was doing. She communicated in the efficient shorthand of someone who expected to be understood. And she did not make anything easier than it was, or harder than it needed to be. He set posts. She steadied them. Thomas brought the tamping bar and the gravel. The morning moved forward with the satisfying rhythm of physical work done well, and by 9 o'clock, 3 of the 4 posts were in, and solid, and Eleanor was looking at the 4th with a slight frown. "The ground's different here," she said. "Harder. We'll need to clear more before we can set it." "Give me 20 minutes, he said. She stood back and watched him work, and he was aware of being watched without being self-conscious about it, which was, he realized, digging into the hard September ground, a new feeling. He had spent most of his adult life performing competence. With her, it was just competence. Just the work. When the post was in and set and solid, she tested it with both hands pushing against it the way she tested everything practically thoroughly, without accepting it on faith. "Good," she said. "High praise," he said. She looked at him with the almost smile. "Don't push your luck." They walked back toward the house, Thomas trailing behind with the tools, and the morning was quiet and cool around them. And Eleanor said without preamble, the thing she had been turning over since Tuesday. "I told Mary something yesterday." "What did you tell her?" "That I stopped being afraid sometime around the Tuesday you didn't come." She kept walking, not looking at him. "When you had a reason to come, and you stayed away because I asked you to." He was quiet for a moment. "You noticed that," he said. "I notice everything," she said. "You know that by now." They reached the gate. Thomas went ahead toward the barn. They stopped. She turned to face him. "I want to say something to you," she said. "And I need to say it correctly, so I'm going to take a moment." He waited. She looked at him with the directness that was simply who she was, not performing courage, not performing openness, just being honest, the way she was honest about drainage surveys and legal provisions, and the number of fence posts that needed replacing. "I have been alone for a long time," she said. "Not lonely exactly. Alone. By choice and by circumstance. And after a while, you stopped distinguishing between the two. And I got very good at it. I structured my life around it. I made it a strength." She paused. "And then you came and argued with Gerald Prentice and brought a lawyer and didn't ride past my gate on a 4th day, even though you wanted to, and I had to start being honest with myself about what I had been calling strength and what was actually just armor." He said nothing. He was listening with his whole self, the way she had asked him to on a morning in July, when she said she didn't know him well enough. "I still don't want to be managed," she said. "Or rescued. Or handled carefully like something breakable." "I know," he said. "I still need the estate to be mine. My decisions. My authority. Yes. And I still don't make choices quickly, or without thinking them all the way through." "Eleanor," he said quietly. "What?" "I know all of that," he said. "I've known it since the drainage ditch. It's not something I'm accepting in spite of. It's something I—" He stopped. Chose the word carefully. "It's something I came back for." She held his gaze. "Say the thing you haven't said," she told him. And here at her gate in the September morning, with the fence they had just repaired solid behind them and the empty road in front, and 3 years of her life reordering itself into something new. He said it. "I love you," he said. "Not the idea of you. Not the legal problem, or the admirable competence, or the woman who found a procedural clause in a 1809 land regulation on 2 days' notice. You. The person who kept the lamp burning and told me to go home to Clara because I needed to hear it, and gave me exactly 7 minutes of celebrating and makes terrible tea and accepts nothing on faith." He held her gaze. "I love you, Eleanor. And I would very much like to stand beside your life, if you'll have me." The gate was between them. She reached out and opened it. "Come inside," she said, "and I'll make you something that isn't tea." He came through the gate. That should have been the end of it. In any story that moved cleanly, it would have been. But Eleanor Whitmore did not live in a story that moved cleanly. And the thing she had not told Edward, the thing she had been sitting with since Wednesday's ruling, came to a head on Friday morning when a letter arrived that she had not expected. It was from Haverfield's attorney. Not threatening, not legal. Something far more unsettling, an apology. A real one. Crail, the Richmond lawyer with the reputation for grinding opponents into settlement, had written to say that he had not known when he took the case that the settlement receipt existed. He had taken Haverfield's account of the debt at face value, as attorneys did, and had not discovered until Finch's filing that he had been building a case on fraudulent ground. He was withdrawing from Haverfield's representation entirely. He was writing to her directly because he believed she deserved to know that. He wrote, "I have spent 20 years in Virginia law. I have not often been wrong about the character of a client. I was wrong about Mr. Haverfield, and indirectly I contributed to 3 years of pressure on an estate that had no legitimate debt. I cannot undo that. I can tell you the truth of how it happened." She read it twice. Then she did something she did not usually do. She went and found Edward before she had finished thinking it through. He was in the study she had given him, the use of the desk for correspondence, a decision that had surprised her less than she'd expected, and he looked up when she came in and read her expression in the way he had gotten good at. "What happened?" he asked. She handed him the letter. He read it. "Crail," he said. "Yes." "I didn't expect that. Neither did I." She sat in the chair across from him, the chair she used when she was working across from Finch, the working chair, not the personal one, and then deliberately she moved to the one beside him instead. "It changes the way I've been thinking about the last 3 years. He looked at her. "I've been angry," she said. "At Haverfield, yes, but also at the county. The people who decided I was failing before I'd had a chance to succeed. Gerald Prentice and his dinner table opinions. Everyone who told my father he should have sold." She paused. "And I've been using that anger to fuel the work which was useful, but it also meant I was always fighting. Even when there was nothing to fight, I was braced for it." He was listening. "Crail's letter is not an absolution," she said. "It doesn't change what happened, but it's someone telling the truth when they didn't have to, and it makes me think about what I want the next part to look like." She looked at him. "I don't want to be braced anymore." "Then don't be," he said. Simply. Like it was possible. "It's not that simple." "No," he agreed. "But it starts with deciding." He held her gaze. "What do you want, Eleanor? Not the estate, not the lawsuit, not the fence line. You." She thought about it. Really thought the way she thought about drainage surveys and crop rotations with full attention, without flinching from the answer. "I want the evenings back," she said. "I want to walk the south field and watch the light change and not be calculating yield while I'm doing it." She paused. "I want someone to make bad coffee in my kitchen in the morning." She looked at him. "I want this, whatever this is. I want to find out what it is when there's nothing urgent driving it." He looked at her for a long moment. "I make excellent coffee," he said. "You make terrible tea. Those are different skills." "Demonstrate," she said. He got up and went to the kitchen. She sat in the study alone for a moment, in the quiet of a house that had been only hers for 3 years, and felt this morning like it was beginning to be something else. Not less hers, just bigger. The way a room feels bigger when you open the windows. She got up and followed him. October arrived with the color change and the cooling, and with it, the end of what the county would later refer to in the particular shorthand that small communities develop for things they want to remember without having to explain in full as the Whitmore summer. Haverfield left Virginia. Not dramatically, not with announcement, he simply began to be absent from the events where he had always been present, and then his property was listed quietly with an agent. And by November, it was generally understood that he had relocated to somewhere no one felt the need to ask about. The county clerk who had accepted the fraudulent 1811 filing resigned before the magistrate's review was complete. Finch sent Eleanor a note. He has confessed to accepting payment from Haverfield in exchange for processing the document. The matter is with the court. She filed it. She did not celebrate that either. It was just the truth arriving where it belonged, which was what truth was supposed to do. Edward's mother came in October. She came in a well-appointed carriage with the expression of a woman who had decided to reserve judgment until she had the full information which Eleanor recognized as the only kind of intelligence she entirely trusted. They met at tea. Eleanor made it correctly this time. She had practiced. Edward had watched her practice with the expression of a man who was deeply charmed and had the wisdom not to say so. Mrs. Harrington sat across from Eleanor in the parlor and looked at her with the direct assessment of a woman who had spent 40 years reading people and stopped pretending she wasn't. "My son tells me you found the legal clause that dismissed Haverfield's counter-petition yourself," she said. "Yes," Eleanor said, "on 2 days' notice." "The regulations weren't unfamiliar to me." Mrs. Harrington looked at her for a moment. "He also tells me you make terrible tea." "I've improved," Eleanor said. Mrs. Harrington picked up her cup, drank, set it down. "Marginally," she said. There was a precise, controlled warmth in her voice that Eleanor recognized because she used the same register herself. "He tells me a great many things. Most of them are about your fence line and your crop rotation and your legal documentation." She paused. "He talks about you the way men talk about things they have decided are permanent." Eleanor held her gaze. "I'm aware," she said. "Are you of the same view?" The parlor was quiet. Through the window, the south field was visible, turning now the summer's work, resting into autumn, the fence line straight and solid where they had repaired it. "Yes," Eleanor said. Mrs. Harrington studied her for a moment more. Then she nodded once with the efficiency of a woman who had gotten what she came for and did not require ceremony around it. "Good," she said. "Now tell me about the drainage correction. Edward's account was technically accurate but emotionally incomplete." Eleanor looked at her, and then for the second time in 3 years she laughed the real laugh, the unguarded one, and began to talk. Edward proposed on a Saturday in November. Not with fanfare, not with the kind of production the county might have expected from a Harrington. He did it in the south field at the fence line, in the flat gray morning light, because that was where they had worked, and where he had watched her, and where he told her later he had first understood that he was not going to be leaving Virginia. He said, "I am not asking you to change what you are. I am not asking to take over anything that belongs to you. I am asking to be the person who is here in the morning, at the fence line, in the study, at the kitchen table, for as long as you'll have me. I am asking to stand beside your life, Eleanor. Not in front of it, not behind it. Beside it." She looked at the fence, straight and solid, the new posts holding. She looked at him. "You'll need to learn to stay in place," she said. "I don't rearrange my life for anyone." "I know," he said. "And the estate stays mine." "Yes." "And you will never once in any company imply that any decision I make here requires your approval." "Understood." "And you will stop letting your horse graze on my east pasture without asking." He stared at her. "I didn't know. Thomas told me in August," she said. "I let it go because we had more pressing issues. But it needs to stop." He was trying not to smile. He was not succeeding. "You have my word," he said. She looked at him one more moment. The November morning was quiet around them. The field was still. The lamp would be burning in the study when they walked back the way it always burned. The way she had kept it burning through 3 years of drought and debt and fighting alone, the small, steady light that had been visible from his window across the dark. "Yes," she said. Just that. Just yes. He reached out his hand. She took it. Not the way people reach for something they're afraid to lose. The way people reach for something they have decided is theirs, steady, deliberate, without performance, and without apology. They walked back to the house together side by side on the November ground, at the same pace in the same direction. The lamp was on. It stayed on. And Eleanor Whitmore, who had held everything alone for 3 years, who had fought when no one expected her to win, who had kept her father's name clean, and her land intact, and her spine straight through. All of it did not need saving. She had never needed saving. What she had needed was someone willing to stand on level ground beside a woman who did not slow down for anyone and stay. Edward Harrington stayed. That was the whole of it, and it was enough, and it was everything.